Hello out there, and thanks for watching. My name's Amy Leask, and I am owner of Red Tea Media. We're a company in Milton, Ontario, and we make interactive digital materials for learners. And we focus on philosophy for kids. We focus on big questions and critical thinking and 21st century skills development. And today, in this video, I'm going to talk about bringing philosophy into the homeschool environment, particularly for younger learners. It's great for teenagers, but you can also do it with children too. So in this video, I'm going to talk very briefly about what philosophy is in the first place, in case there are people out there who've never taken a course or who've never tried it. I happen to think that everybody does philosophy at some point. They just don't know they are. So we're going to chat about that a little bit. I'm going to go over some of the rules for philosophy, how you actually do it and do it well, rather than just asking big questions randomly. We're going to talk about how it fits into the homeschool environment, the benefits to a child in a homeschool environment for doing philosophy. And then finally, I'm going to give you some real activities you can try with your kids at home that present philosophical questions in a really fun and engaging way. So yes, at the end of the video, I'm also going to put up my contact info. I love talking shop. So if anyone has any questions afterwards, if you've tried out one of the activities and you want to tell me how awesome it was and how amazing it was with your kids and how you love doing philosophy with your kids, knock on wood, you can contact me with that. You can also ask questions too. So thanks very much again for tuning in, and hope you get a lot out of this. So what is philosophy anyway? This is a pretty good place to start. Some parents and educators are familiar with it. Maybe they took it in high school or at the university or college level. Some parents really aren't familiar with it at all. Until fairly recently, philosophy wasn't really offered at the high school level even. You had to wait till university to do it at all. It is in the curriculum in Ontario for high school students, but it really isn't still in the elementary curriculum, although I think it should be. It's one of those things that we've been doing our whole lives, and most of us don't realize that we've been doing it. And the trick isn't to sort of entice children to do it, it's to teach them to do it well, to do it more effectively. So, as I see it, philosophy has two parts, and the first part is a different type of question. It's built on these big questions. So, these are why questions, why we are the way we are, why the universe is the way it is, how we fit into it, why we assume some things, why we do things the way we do. These are all examples of sort of why questions, and we're going to go into some more specific ones as well as some activities at the end of this talk. Philosophy questions are open-ended, and usually they don't have one clear answer, which really entices some people and frustrates other people, but there's a reason for it. So we've got philosophy as a specific type of question, a specific type of open-ended why big question. Philosophy is also a set of rules for logical thinking, for effective logical thinking. And we're going to go over a list of fallacies or a list of errors in logic later. So part of philosophy is learning to recognize these big questions, but it's also learning the practice of thinking about them, thinking logically, thinking critically, thinking rationally. And you can see why this would be an important set of skills for anyone of any age to learn. It's an old practice. It's been done for thousands and thousands of years. A lot of people, when they hear the word philosophy, they think of sort of old guys in togas. It is an ancient practice, but it's one that has a lot of applications for the modern world. And it's not just about abstract concepts. It's about taking these big questions and applying them to issues that all of us face, even children, on a daily basis. I consider it really important at this point in time because, for one thing, the prevalence of social media. Even small children are sort of subject to information overload. We've got the notions of fake news and alternative facts. And I think we need philosophy more now than we may have before. So I see philosophy as a filter as well as a set of questions and a way of thinking. I see it as a way to sort of screen all of this information that we're bombarded with, a way to question what we hear, what we see, what we assume to be true. It's a way to evaluate what we're thinking, and a way to make sure that the information that we're getting and that we're giving out too is useful, true, and helpful. It's a way of teaching ourselves how to think instead of what to think. And this is something we pass on to our children as well. Here are some examples of questions, philosophy questions, that a child might ask. If you're a parent or an educator, you've probably heard some of these. Why are some things real and some things imaginary? And this extends into, the difference between being awake and being asleep and dreaming too. So there's some really interesting conversations to be had around that. Why do some people get to do what they want while others don't? The whole idea of power and authority is really kind of interesting to a child. So there's some really great, meaty conversations to be had there. Why do we eat some animals and have others as pets? And if you've got a budding environmentalist, this can extend into sort of animal rights as well. Pretty interesting stuff. Why is this thing beautiful while something else is ugly? And we're going to talk later about an art activity that you can do with your child. Why does it sometimes seem like my eyes are playing tricks on me? Perception and sort of the way we learn and the way we know and the way we figure out if something is true, those are all really big questions in philosophy, and they're also really big questions for children. So now that we know what philosophy is in a general sense, we should talk about why we should do it in a homeschool environment. What makes it important for any student to do, and what about the homeschool environment makes it kind of ideal for a philosophical dialogue? Well, there's a lot of different reasons why philosophy belongs in any learning environment. My favorite one is that it's cross-curricular. It bolts on to pretty much any subject that you might be studying, and it actually enhances it. And it's a real pity that it isn't part of the regular Ontario elementary school curriculum, because I think it bolsters just about any subject area. And we're going to go through again at the end of this video some very specific examples of how you can attach it to various subject areas. I love that philosophy thrives on teachable moments, that you can pull any ordinary everyday situation, you can pull a philosophical question out of it, or you can attach one to it. And I think that's something that really fits well into a homeschool environment, that it doesn't necessarily have to be very, very scripted or planned. It can just arise naturally and organically out of any kind of lesson. And if you learn how to kind of harness those questions, how to recognize that they've come up, there's real opportunities to just sort of play with it and build on an ordinary lesson with it. It's ageless. Pretty much any age of child can do philosophy. And this is really great if you have a homeschool environment where you have children of varying ages. Everyone can contribute to the same questions, or you can have different questions for different age groups. But even very small children, it happens in short bursts, of course, but even very small children can contribute to a philosophical discussion, which I love. It can be adapted to all kinds of different learning styles. It doesn't just have to be about, verbal conversations. It doesn't have to be just about journaling and written work. Philosophy can be brought into music. Philosophy can be brought into sports. It can be brought into cooking. It can be brought into science. So no matter what your child's learning style is, there's an approach to philosophy that'll fit with that. I also love that it's an excellent skill builder. There's no better way to build critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, communication skills. So that's really important, and philosophy is almost a turnkey solution for that. It also helps children build personal skills like empathy, self-awareness, global awareness. It helps with character development. So there's personal as well as academic benefits to philosophy. It's got lots of real-world applications. There's ample opportunity with philosophy to take a theory and apply it to a specific situation or a specific lesson. It works in a multi-level learning environment as well. Again, if you have children of varying interests and age groups and levels of ability, there's room for philosophy in all of that. Another reason why I think philosophy belongs in any environment with learning and not just a homeschool environment is that kids really, really, really like to ask big questions. And most of the time when we tell parents what the subject matter of our materials is, they sort of smile and say, yes, I've already been getting that. Children really love big questions. It's just part of being small to ask why. And if you nurture that, hopefully the why lasts longer than early childhood. So doing philosophy with them in any environment, whether it be at home or in a classroom at a school, you're building on something that already happens. You're building on an interest or a passion or a drive that's already there, even in older children. So you're meeting them where they want to be met, where they already are, and you're building on something that's very natural to them. And I wanted to show a video clip. I wanted to put one in here of children actually doing a philosophical activity, just to show how an organic discussion, an organic dialogue can arise from even a very, very simple activity.
What do humans do differently? But it's kind of fun being a dog, because you can really run and play with the frisbee, but you can put your milk on the frisbee. Freddie thinks about treats all day. He thinks that the treat's going to taste yummy. Dogs don't talk properly. Dogs don't talk like humans.
We think, which means like we know what we're doing and we're thinking before we do it.
We care about other people. We don't try to kill anyone. Not anywhere. They can actually say stuff like you can hear. They mean it.
Like when we go to the park, we go on slides and go on monkey bars and stuff.
Like going crazy and stuff. You go to the washroom and toilet. Not anywhere. Mm-hmm. And we can sniff with persons can't. You have claws. And that's kind of really fun being a dog.
Philosophy is interesting. These are real-world, important human issues. So even children recognize that as well. There's a lot of spark that happens when you introduce philosophical questions into a discussion. Another question we often get when we talk about doing philosophy with children, from parents in particular, and also from educators, is what kind of things do I need to have on hand in order to do philosophy with children? And the good news is you need very, very little. I guess the most important resource you need is an open mind and good listening skills in your learners. But there's very little that you actually have to purchase. It's not like doing a science experiment where you have to have certain chemicals on hand or certain pieces of equipment. Philosophy is a very low-tech, or can be a very low-tech, resource-free sort of practice to do. So that's something really great about it. You can bolt it on to basically any other resources that you have out there. And again, we're going to look at some specific examples of activities at the end, and you'll get a sense of how you can use what you already have. Arts and craft supplies are always useful for philosophy. A lined paper or a journal for reflection is great. If you do have audiovisual equipment around to record audio clips or to take a little video of someone, that's a great way to do it too. Again, it's not absolutely necessary. Any games and apps that they have on a mobile device can be used as a tool for discussing philosophy. Sports equipment, board games, puppets. You can apply philosophy questions to just about anything, and you really don't have to buy any extra materials to do it. So it's much more about how you do it than what you use, which is great. So philosophy is basically free. So are there rules for doing philosophy with kids? Well, yes, there are rules for doing philosophy with anyone. As I mentioned before, philosophy isn't just about bringing up these nice, juicy, wonderful, creative, big questions. It's about learning to think properly through them, learning to develop the thinking skills that go with philosophy. So there are pitfalls that you want to avoid, both in your teaching practices and in what your learners produce as well. Philosophy sort of leans on the idea that you have to avoid these pitfalls in logic, that are fallacies. And there's a whole list of them. It's really easy when you're doing philosophy in education, especially with children, to have the discussion sort of descend into things like saying, well, whatever you say is fine, my answer and your answer are equally good, everyone is equally right. And it takes a little finesse to sort of get over those ideas. Basically, what you want to do is acknowledge that there is not just one answer for every philosophical question, but some answers are better than others. And teaching a child to evaluate each answer before accepting it, and things like comparing it to other answers, is essential to studying philosophy. This is how philosophers in general develop thinking skills, including with children. So the idea is to take an idea, to accept that there are lots of different answers to every big question, but to weigh and measure them, to compare them, to discuss them before picking one, or before picking two or three. So it's a good idea. A nice starting point is to have a child generate their own list of rules for doing philosophy. So if you want to be a good thinker, what do you need to do? And things like, listening to other people and thinking about things and reflecting on things. Those are the kind of rules that might come up with a child making this list. So this is a teachable moment in and of itself, to have your child or your children generate their own list of how to be a good thinker. What are rules for thinking? And then you can go back and compare it to a list, a more formal list of fallacies and rules for thinking. There are other things that you have to keep in mind when you're doing philosophy with very young children, and one of them is that a lengthy conversation may not happen, and that's fine. Little bits and bites of philosophy with a young child are absolutely useful and enriching. That's great. You may find that you need to, and you probably find that you need to explore philosophical questions while you're doing something else. So making it activity-based is absolutely necessary, especially with smaller children. I can't picture myself sitting down with a 5-year-old and having an hour-long discussion about anything. And that's fine. The thinking skills are still developed. The big questions still come up. All the wonderful benefits that you can reap from philosophy still happen even in small bites. And it's not going to happen all at once either. It's going to happen over a long period of time. You're going to find that you have a 10-minute discussion about something and then it comes up again a few weeks later. Maybe your child has reevaluated their point of view, and that's great. That's all part of the philosophical process. It's not going to happen in a controlled environment either. I think a lot of parents find that their children ask why questions, at inopportune moments. So it may happen at the grocery store. It may happen when you're tucking them in for bed. It may happen, on the way to soccer practice, things like that. And again, that's fine. It doesn't have to happen in a formal, controlled setting. You can come back to a big question anytime, anywhere, and their experiences, their, what's going on in their lives at the moment, their activities, their interests. That's all going to feed into it at any given moment. Philosophy thrives on reflection and self-evaluation. And another really useful exercise with this, another rule that you want to keep in mind, is that it's okay to let even a small child self-assess. That thing you said a few weeks ago, what do you think of that? Do you still agree with that? Do you want to change your answer to that? Have you come up with something better? Did you watch something on television that sort of, made you think about something else? It's absolutely fine and preferable for a small child to assess themselves as well as have someone else step in and say, have you thought about this? Choose questions that they find interesting. There's a philosophy question for just about every subject area, every interest, every age group. Pick something that they want to talk about. That's a really good rule. Obviously, you want to bring in other stuff later on. You can introduce things too, but if they've really latched on to something that interests them, go with that. Pull that in. Find a philosophy question that goes with that. So this first activity is arts-based, and it could be for a child who's really visual, who really loves to draw, or if you're trying to draw a learner into the arts, if you're trying to get someone interested in it. This is sort of a neat way to go in, the side door kind of thing. So all you really need, it's very, very simple, is a blank piece of paper, and it can be any piece of paper, big or small. If they really love to draw huge murals, you might want to divide, a giant piece of mural paper in half, but it can really just be a plain piece of paper. It can even be scrap paper. So you fold it in half, and on one side you want to do something that's beautiful. So you can write beautiful across the top if your child needs a prompt, or you can just let them go and draw. So you have them draw probably an inanimate object is best, that they think is really, really beautiful. And it can be something very, very simple from their home environment. You can have them draw their favorite beautiful stuffed animal, or a beautiful chocolate chip cookie, or a beautiful flower, and really go for something that's sort of in their world. On the other side of the page, you want to ask them to do something to that drawing to make it less beautiful. Or if they really want contrast, they can just choose another object that they don't think is beautiful. So on one side of the page, you have beautiful, and on the other side of the page, you have less beautiful. And what you want to do is discuss what the difference is between the two sides of the page. What makes this beautiful and this not so much? And it's really effective if it's the same object with something taken away or something changed, because then you can really sort of pinpoint the aspects of the item that made it beautiful. And in philosophy, we call this aesthetics. We call it the study of beauty and art. And this can be done, if your child isn't into drawing, it can be done with modeling clay. It can be done with found object sculptures. Any way that you can represent something that they think is beautiful and something they don't think is beautiful, and discuss the difference between. And that's a philosophy question. So if you have a child who's very much into sports or loves games, that's a fantastic opportunity to discuss the whole idea of fairness and rules. And what I like to do is have children make up their own games, their own sport, or their own, board game, or their own, even just a regular sort of, get up and run around the room, duck, duck, goose kind of game. So you want to do that. You can have them write down the rules. You can write down the rules for them, and then play a few rounds of it. See how it works. Afterwards, sit them down and ask them if they thought the rules were fair, or if there's anything about them that they would change to make it more fair for the players. And this brings up all kinds of interesting ideas about inclusiveness, about power, about authority, about fairness. So it's a really great springboard, and at the same time, you can get your kids up and moving and active so that they get in their, their regular hour a day of activity. So give that a try. If you have a child who's interested in technology, who loves to build robots, who loves Lego, who loves circuits, that sort of thing, who's interested in computers or machines in general, there are lots of great philosophy questions that come out of that as well. What I like to do, and I have a robot fan at home as well, is talk about the difference between humans and robots. Talk about the possibility of a robot becoming human. What would have to change about a machine to make it a person? And that's a really, really nice, juicy philosophy question, and pretty topical too, because we do have robots in the world that are becoming pretty close to people. So that's an interesting question to talk about if you have a technically minded child at home. Okay, I wanted to give a suggestion about ecology, about nature studies, about the environment. And children are pretty curious about this from a fairly early age, so it's not that hard to get them to talk philosophically about it either. And there's different ways that you can work philosophy into nature studies as well, into ecology, into environmental studies. If you have a child who likes the outdoors, take them on a nature hike. Take them to the park, take them to the woods, and find an insect, find a small animal, find a plant if they like, and have a really interesting discussion about the difference between the plant and themselves. What makes a plant a plant? What makes a human? What makes an animal an animal? If your child isn't crazy about the outdoors, but is still curious, you can go with what you have at home too. Stuffed animals. Have them pick their favorite animal. Usually unicorns don't work as well because they're not real. They're a little more hard to grasp. But have them pick their favorite stuffed animal that's an animal, actually an animal, and talk about the difference between animals and humans. And sometimes this leads to discussions about humans using the environment, humans feeling that they have authority over the environment, that they're entitled to take stuff. So really good discussions about that. And if you've got something tactile, like a bug, if you've got something, make sure they're gentle with the bugs. If you've got something like a stuffed animal at home, that helps too. A house plant as well. Have a little seat in front of the house plant and see if they have any thoughts about that. So it's really interesting to see their take on the relationship to nature. And that's a philosophy question. That's a really good philosophy question to start with. Okay, I wanted to give a suggestion about ecology, about nature studies, about the environment. And children are pretty curious about this from a fairly early age, so it's not that hard to get them to talk philosophically about it either. And there's different ways that you can work philosophy into nature studies as well, into ecology, into environmental studies. If you have a child who likes the outdoors, take them on a nature hike. Take them to the park, take them to the woods, and find an insect, find a small animal, find a plant if they like, and have a really interesting discussion about the difference between the plant and themselves. What makes a plant a plant? What makes a human a human? What makes an animal an animal? If your child isn't crazy about the outdoors, but is still curious, you can go with what you have at home too. Stuffed animals, have them pick their favorite animal. Usually unicorns don't work as well because they're not real. They're a little more hard to grasp, but have them pick their favorite stuffed animal that's an animal, actually an animal, and talk about the difference between animals and humans. And sometimes this leads to discussions about humans using the environment, humans feeling that they have authority over the environment, that they're, entitled to take stuff. So really good discussions about that. And if you've got something tactile, like a bug, if you've got something, make sure they're gentle with the bugs. If you've got something like a stuffed animal at home, that helps too. A house plant as well. Have a little seat in front of the house plant and see if they have any thoughts about that. So it's really interesting to see their take on the relationship to nature. And that's a philosophy question. That's a really good philosophy question to start with. You've probably also found, cut that, Ruth. You've probably also found that your small child especially really likes to collect, and as they get older they collect different things, but that impulse is still there. For example, we have at our house 1 million of these little Lalaloopsy dolls. So you can use your child's impulse to collect to do philosophy with them as well, in whatever format you like. But ask your child to collect questions. You can make them into baseball style cards. If your child is into modeling clay and crafts and that sort of thing, you can make some sort of visual representation of questions and have sort of a little diorama or a museum of them. But encourage your child to collect big questions. Have them walk around and ask why, and go beyond sort of things like, why is the sky blue, or why do my shoelaces come untied, to ask things like, why do I have less power because I'm little, or why does this seem fair and that doesn't seem fair, or why does time seem to go faster at some points or others? And make a collection of the questions, make a physical representation of them that they can keep in a shoebox or that they can keep on a cork board on the wall, but encourage them to collect big questions the way they collect these things. Philosophy has been done in schools for about 30 years now. It's not that widespread, but one of the things that they do in schools, in classrooms, is present philosophy through storybooks. And if you've got an avid reader at home, or you've got a child who's a reluctant reader and you'd like to encourage them to become a more avid reader, you could do philosophy with their storybooks, with the stuff that they've already got around. For example, The Giving Tree. This is a really popular one in philosophy studies in schools, talking about the idea of generosity, of sacrifice, of fairness, of kindness, of relationships. So you can pull from the stories that they already like too. And this can happen at bedtime. It can happen, while you're waiting at the dentist's office. It's a really nice, easy way to work it into an everyday routine. And it's fun too. They like stories. Children like to read for the most part. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our talk now. I hope everyone found it interesting and useful. I hope everyone gives it a try, bring up a couple of questions and see how it goes. Thank you very much for listening in. This is a passion of mine as an educator and as a parent. I've been doing it for a number of years now, with pretty much every age group of human being, and I love the benefits that it reaps. I love the wonderful conversations that spring out of it. I love the thinking skills that people build from it. So if you'd like more information on philosophy for kids in general, I can provide links to studies that have been done that sort of talk about how philosophy with kids sort of has a ripple effect out into other subject areas. And if you're interested in that, I'm happy to provide links with that too. All my contact information is on this slide, and I love to talk shop. So if anyone's interested, if you have further questions, if you want to tell me how an activity went, that would be great. I love to hear about how different children receive this sort of thing. But thanks again for listening in, and happy thinking. I hope everyone has fun with philosophy.